I asked Louis to start us off in terms of this vision that Hamilton had for New York City and for the nation, just to get us sort of started again and back in thinking about Hamilton. So, Louis, want to say a few words about Hamilton and his vision for the country in New York City, and mostly give your thoughts on this vision?
Was it seemed like Hamilton, he wanted to base the economy around commerce and not agriculture or slave labor. He wanted that to be the future of New York City, and then eventually spread that to the rest of the country.
And what is commerce? I was thinking about that this morning. What is commerce?
Commerce.
What does that word mean? I was thinking about, does it need trade? Does it need, what does it mean to be?
According to a dictionary, it means the activity of buying and selling, especially on a large scale.
Yeah, yeah. So it's really the marketplace, isn't it?
Yeah.
So he believed in the marketplace. He wanted to create, what else he wanted? He wanted industry, manufacturing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the labor force would be
Like wages.
the immigrants, a wage, as opposed to what Jefferson represented in the South, which was what, agricultural, slave labor. You stay where you are. You sell you grow you grow your product and you sell it. So what do you think about that, Louis?
I think
What's your personal thought? Yeah.
I think I think it was a pretty good vision. Like that's definitely what it is now, the economy now today.
I mean, for you personally, if I'm going to push you a little bit, if you chose a lifestyle for you personally, would you think do you think that's a good life? That's a good way to live? You like it? You like this idea that Hamilton had, that this would be the kind of life that you want to live?
I I'm kind of mixed because yeah, yeah, like commerce, like it's definitely be the way of the future, but you still need agriculture. But slavery definitely had to go.
Man, you said that with passion. It had to go because why? What was in your heart at that moment?
Because it's morally wrong. Like you can't own another human being as property.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. When you do your writing, put that in, because that passion that I just felt coming from you will make your writing better, and it's always best to write your passion. And so write that down, because I felt it coming from you. Anything else you want to say to get us started on this journey of who was Alexander Hamilton, what was his vision, and how did it contribute to the growth of New York, or you're good?
I think I'm good for now.
Okay, anybody else want to jump in on this in terms of Hamilton's vision? Anybody want to add anything?
Alexander Hamilton was a rapper.
He was a rapper. All right, we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that. We're going to get to the room where it happened. And we're going to get to Hamilton's debate with Jefferson. But wait. Let's get a little background first. So what I want to launch into now is the Assumption Act. First, I'll give you a little background. Then we'll break up into groups. We'll come back and talk about what we found in the reading. All of this to help you answer the questions that I've sent out twice. There are 9 questions. Did anybody not get the questions, the revised questions? If you didn't get the revised questions, put it in the chat. And Oleg, could you please, send that to anybody in the chat who needs the questions? And everybody needs attachment 128A. So if you don't have 128A, also in the chat, send that to Oleg, and thank you, Oleg, for sending it out to people. So for some background on the Assumption Act, and the reason I'm focusing on it is that it really reveals both Hamilton's vision how he developed that vision, how he differed from Jefferson and Madison in that vision, and the impact the Assumption Act had on the growth of New York, going back to our last class or two classes ago, when we raised the question, how did New York rise out of the ashes after the American Revolution? What made it this great city by 1830, 1840 at the latest? Within 50 years, it rises up from being a depopulated little town, totally destroyed by the revolution. So we're trying to get some reasons why this happened. And one of the reasons I want to highlight is the Assumption Act. So let me give you a little background before we get into reading and group work. The New York City has been and still is filled with risk takers. You may want to write that down, that the essence of New York, the fancy word that's used many times, is entrepreneurs, right? That New York City has these speculators, these gamblers. Everybody sort of comes to New York and wants to sort of roll the dice and make it in New York. Well, this goes back to when Hamilton was in New York. This goes back to New York in the 1790s. New Yorkers were speculators, they were investors, they still are. And what they did, I think I mentioned in the last class, they invested in these securities. They invested in these pieces of paper which were issued by each colony to finance the American Revolution. These were basically IOUs. These were basically pieces of paper that when a person in Virginia or South Carolina lent money to the troops to finance clothing and guns for the revolution, they gave $100. I'm making that up, but let's say they gave $100, and they got back a piece of paper which said, Virginia owes you $100. I mean, you could do that today, actually. You could lend money to New York State. It's called a bond. And you buy these bonds, and New York State gives you a piece of paper. It says, oh, New York State owes you $100. And you've invested, and there's interest that you're expecting, and then in some certain amount of time, you get the money back. Well, this was true then. To finance the revolution, each colony sold off paper, and it looked good. North Carolina gives you a piece of paper, you give them $100, and you have this piece of paper. Okay, so the revolution happens, we win, and these pieces of paper aren't worth much because no one's got any money. And so now the state of South Carolina or the state of Virginia looks at you and says, yeah, we'd like to pay you, but we don't have the money. And so you're sitting there with this piece of paper and you're saying to yourself and your family, hey, I lent money to fight this revolution. I got this piece of paper and I can't take this piece of paper and go to the grocery store with it because it seems like it's not worth much right now. Okay, so New York City speculators, New York City risk takers get wind of this, and they go traveling down to the South and they start buying up these pieces of paper, and they come to you in South Carolina, they come to you in Virginia, they come to you in North Carolina, wherever. They travel around, they come to your house, they come to your farm, they say, you got these pieces of paper, right? I'm going to use the $100 as the example. And they're not going to pay you. It doesn't look good. But I'll pay you, but I'm not going to pay you the $100. I'm going to give you $10. And I'll buy your piece of paper that you have. I'll give you $10, and you give me this piece of paper worth $100, and we got a deal. Well, that deal was wild. I mean, millions of dollars were sold to these speculators on these pieces of paper that people felt, well, it's not really worth what it says in face value. So it's estimated that $25 to $40 million worth of these pieces of paper transferred to New York City investors. And what they were counting on is Hamilton. What they were counting on is that Hamilton would get the new government, the new federal government, to buy this debt. And so that this 25 million, or maybe it was 80 million, right? The federal government, and here's the key word, would assume that debt. And that's why it's called the Assumption Act, that the federal government would issue paper to South Carolina, would issue paper saying, we'll cover that debt. We'll make that piece of paper at face value. And in addition, it'll be a federal piece, we'll give you this federal stock and we'll give you 6% interest. So these New York speculators, they stood to get a fortune of money if Hamilton could get this Assumption Act passed, which basically said that the federal government would assume the debt, right? So that is crucial to understand. Madison was against it from Virginia. Jefferson was against it because they knew that all of this paper had been bought by New York speculators. So what happens? Hamilton realizes that the future of the country, the future of his vision of commerce, of manufacturing, of industry, relied on a strong central government. Look at us today look at us today coming out of, hopefully coming out of COVID, coming out of the pandemic. Look what Biden is doing. Look how he is, look how a strong federal government, right, is playing a role to stimulate the economy, to give all of us some money so we can be consumers. And Hamilton knew that. Hamilton had this vision. He knew that we had to have this strong federal government. So he says to himself, I got to make a deal. And he goes to Jefferson, who held a very important leadership position among all of the South. He was a slave owner. He was well respected. He goes to Jefferson one night, June 20th, Carmela's birthday, and he goes to Jefferson, and they have dinner. I think Madison may have been there, and he basically says, let's make a deal. I want the Assumption Act. You and Madison are standing in the way. What do you want in exchange for you to bring the South to support of this assuming the debt? Anybody know what Jefferson told him? Anybody read ahead, or anybody have a sense of what Jefferson told him in this moment in Jefferson's house, which was made famous by the show Hamilton and a song called "The Room Where It Happened"? This is the room where it happened. This is the room where it happened. There's Hamilton and Jefferson. Hamilton saying, "I want the Assumption Act," and Jefferson saying, "Okay, here's the deal." You know what the deal was? Anybody?
Was it that they get to keep their slaves?
For sure they get to keep the slaves. For sure they get to keep them. And something even more than that, Daisy. And something even more, something we live with today. Anybody want to guess, or should I just go and
Tobacco?
tell? What's that?
Tobacco?
Well, tobacco, tell me more about tobacco. That's a great thing. Tell me, what do you mean by tobacco?
Because I know in the South they used to grow tobacco, and it used to be like their main cash flow for the South.
Yeah, and then when Eli Whitney invents the cotton gin, it becomes cotton. You're so right that tobacco was the main crop, but then when they figure out how to take all the seeds, the little seeds out of the cotton bolls, cotton becomes the main cash crop of the South. But tobacco was first. You're good. Anybody else want to guess in terms of what Jefferson wanted?
Taxes?
Definitely not taxes. Hamilton wanted taxes. Hamilton wanted tax. Hamilton was basing this whole thing on taxes, that we would basically tax everybody to bring money into the federal government. And Jefferson was not so in favor of taxes. But what did Jefferson want? One more guess and then I'll tell you.
He wanted the capital of the politics to not be in New York. So I think in exchange for Hamilton's view, Hamilton compromised and told him that the government will get out of New York. Like, go back to southern states,
Okay,
if I'm not mistaken.
you're,
Am I wrong?
what's that?
Am I wrong?
No, you're absolutely right. In fact, I want you to repeat it so others can write it down. So Tiffany's going to say, and you can quote Tiffany. Tiffany's going to say once again, hi, Francesca. Tiffany's going to say once again,
Hello.
nice to see you. Oh, your picture anyway. Tiffany's going to say once again, the deal in the room where it happened, that what Jefferson says to Hamilton when Hamilton comes with the Assumption Act. Tiffany, they're gonna write it down. Go ahead.
Okay, so Hamilton trades the location of the nation's capital for the freedom to create a financial system of his own design.
Perfect. I mean, say it one more time because people really want to write this down. I'm sorry to push you.
Hamilton trades the location of the nation's capital for the freedom to create a financial system of his own design.
And so the capital moves from New York to where? Where does Jefferson say he wants the capital? Tiffany, you know? It's where it is today.
Washington, D.C.
Yeah, which is in the South. Jefferson says to Hamilton, okay, I'll support your vision. I'll support the Assumption Act, but I hate New York. I hate the North. I don't want the capital of this country in New York. Let's put it on the Potomac River. It was then, a swamp. Let's move it to the Potomac River and create Washington, D.C. And in that moment, in the room where it happened, June 20th, 1789, Hamilton says, okay, we'll move the capital. Capital will no longer be in New York City. We will build a new capital on the banks of the Potomac River. In the meantime, the capital will go to temporary places. It goes to Philadelphia. So it moves a little bit before they get Washington ready. But Hamilton agrees that, okay, we'll move the capital out of New York if I can get my vision. And what impact, as a New Yorker, looking at your city today and looking at Washington, D.C., what impact does that have on the future of New York? Narissa? Hello, Narissa. You there? She's muted. Oleg, did you mute? Can you unmute everybody?
I cannot unmute.
Sure, okay. Does anybody have any thoughts about New York City today as it relates to Washington, D.C., and what impact did moving the capital have to our city? Anybody want to take a personal guess? Brian, you want to try it?
No. I'm being honest.
All right, I'll go one more time. Atta, you want to give it a try? What impact does this have on New York, moving the capital from New York to Washington, D.C.? You want to give it a thought?
Honestly, I wouldn't be able to tell you.
Okay. I'm gonna go for it. So you go like this. Moving the capital, the center of government, from New York to another place, frees up New York. You got to write this down. It gives New York tremendous freedom because now we no longer have to be bothered with the whole country. We no longer have to care about the whole country, right? All we have to care about is making money. So there's a tremendous freedom, which I don't think Hamilton would have even predicted. once you move the capital, once you move government, right, the federal government out of New York and put it on the Potomac, put it in what's now called Washington, D.C., you now have two centers, two separate centers of power. One is government in Washington, D.C., and the other is an economic center, a cultural center. So unlike Europe, unlike London, Berlin, Paris, Vienna, where you have the government, the center of power of government and the economic power together, this country, on that night, on June 20th, 1789, with that agreement between Jefferson and Hamilton, decides to separate government and the power of government from economic power and cultural power. And you know what Hamilton says about this? When asked, you know what Hamilton said? He says, I don't care where they move the government, as long as the government does what I want it to do. And then he follows that by saying, and you can write this down, although we'll no longer be the capital with an A-L, C-A-P-I-T-A-L, we, meaning New York, will be the center of capital with an O, C-A-P-I-T-O-L. In other words, what Hamilton is saying is that we'll no longer be the capital as the center of government, but we'll be the center of capital, meaning capital as money. And he loved that. He loved that. And he went along.
Wouldn't that be,
What?
wouldn't that be the other way around then?
Was it the other way around? Did I get the spelling wrong? I'm terrible at spelling. All right.
Yeah,
So
capital with an O would be the government, right? And then with an A would be the money.
I say it again so people can quote you, not me. Go.
Capital with an O would be the government, and capital with an A would be commerce and money.
All right. So give everybody the sentence so they get it right, rather than getting it wrong from me.
You give
Go
the
on.
sentence.
What's that?
You say the sentence. I can't remember it fully.
All right. You correct me on the spelling, okay? We'll do it as a team.
All
So
right.
Hamilton says, I don't really care where the capital will be. Ivan, give me the spelling of the word capital.
Capital with an O. O-L.
That New York City will now be the center of capital. Ivan.
A-L.
And Ivan, what does that mean to you in your own thoughts, that statement that Hamilton makes, referring to the center of government versus the center of money? What does it mean to you?
He doesn't really care where the building itself is located in the country, as long as and New York City becomes the center of all money in the country.
And you think that worked out that way, Ivan?
Yeah, I think so.
I think so too.
It's still like that today.
What's that?
It's still like that to this day.
It's still like that to this day. I'm going to add something to that, Ivan. I think at that point, the attitude of, and think about this, the attitude of New Yorkers becomes, okay, you want to leave, you want the federal government to leave, that's fine. That's fine. We'll just turn our back on you. We'll look towards commerce with Europe, and the rest of you will be our suburbs. The rest of you will be just suburbs. Do you think that's an attitude that still stays in New York?
Yeah, definitely.
Go ahead, give me your attitude.
Like New York is seen as one of the major cities of the whole country.
Yeah.
One of the actual cities with skyscrapers, plentiful, more than Chicago.
Yeah. How do you see the rest of the country when you're being in New York? What's your personal thought about the rest of the country outside of New York?
It's all country.
What?
It's all country.
It's all country. Well, I got to tell you, I was raised in Brooklyn. I have the same attitude, and I think that starts with Hamilton saying, okay, go form your government in Washington, D.C., live and be well. we're going to turn our backs on the whole country. We're going to face Europe. We're going to trade with Europe, and the rest of you will just be country. It'll just be this, you know, the attitude being, it's fine, you know, do what you want to do. We're New York. We're going to make money. Did I summarize it well in terms of your mind, Ivan?
Yes, that sounds good.
Sounds good. Okay. Any questions on what I've been saying? Anybody have any questions before we break down into groups to answer these 8 questions I've raised? Anybody want to share a thought about Hamilton, about the Assumption Act? Carmela, you want to share a thought about what happened on your birthday?
I mean, like, for lack of a better word, it's dope that Hamilton was like, you know, go ahead and take the Capitol. I don't really care. We have the money. So that's all I care about. So, I mean, or was that Hamilton? Hamilton said that? Yeah, Hamilton said that. So basically Hamilton was about his money from day one. And I think that's why New York is the way it is. And I think if it had gone otherwise, New York would be kind of lame and be like Washington, D.C. Like nobody goes to Washington, D.C. really, do they?
Well, they go there for tours. They go there to lobby government.
I went. It's not that exciting. It's really not. My family took a vacation there, and we went to Williamsburg as well. Like we did all the interesting presidential stuff, but it wasn't really that interesting, to be honest.
It's boring.
Like I'd rather walk around New York, man.
Yeah, that is the New Yorker's attitude. That's what I was trying to say. It was a Christian who just jumped in there. Was that you, Christian?
Yes, it's boring because all you do is just look at the White House. You can't go in. You can't see the inside.
Yeah.
There's nothing to do.
And then they're like, here's a gift shop, buy a figure of the White House. I'm like, I'm good, thanks. I'm okay.
Let me just share one more personal experience. I've traveled around, and when my book on Steinway came out, I was on a book tour and everything. And wherever I went, the whole town closed down at 9, 10 o'clock at night. You couldn't get anything to eat. It was I mean, no matter where I went, everything, 10 o'clock at night, things are closed. And I'm eating machine food. It's in some hotel. And then I go to see people, friends or so, and they spend their time telling me how wherever I was better than New York. You know, and at one point I looked at them and said, you know, we never talk that way in New York. You know, we know we're better. We don't ever say, oh, we're better than Chicago. We're better than, we don't go there because we just know that. And I think this starts with Hamilton. Hamilton says, fine, take the Capitol, go. New York will be this special center that all gets decided that night in the room where it happened, June 20th, 1789. Oleg, there's a clip that I sent to the class from the show Hamilton. Can you play that for us? Can you dig that out? The clip about the room where it happened. Do you have that? You have that clip? I sent the link. Am I surprising you? Is it too much?
Yeah, I didn't know we will play this.
Yeah, I know, I'm surprising you. Okay, we'll do it some other time. Okay, let's divide up into groups. We've got
we have 15 people.
15 people. So let's do we can do seven groups of 2, and one of the groups will have 3, right?
Yep.
Okay.
So 6 group of 2 and
we're only going to do question 2 through 8. So we can do all the questions. All right. So it's going to be confusing. Can you start with group 2 instead of group 1, or is that too confusing? It's too confusing for you, right?
Yeah, I have to rename it everything.
Yeah. Okay, so just know that group 1 is going to do question 2, and group 2 is going to do question 3, and so on and so on, because we've already done question 1. Okay, so divide the class up into 7 groups. One group will have 3, and if you're in group 1, you're really going to be doing question 2, and if you're in group 2, you're doing question 3, and so on. Okay, and then I'll come visit you. Everybody have the questions? You'll need the questions, and you'll need the attachment 128A. Okay, I'm gonna come visit you, but first, Oleg, divide everybody up.
Okay, are you ready, guys? Okay.
They're ready, I can tell.
They're ready. Okay, let's go. Yep.
There they go.
Yeah.
Scary.
Jason.
But Jason, we still have Jason.
Yeah, Jason.
Why do we still have Jason?
I don't know. He's not go
Not
to
there.
room. Jason.
Jason, are you there?
Oh,
all right.
okay.
Okay.
That's
All
it.
right. Take me to group one. Hello, everybody back?
Yeah, we back.
Okay. Okay, so we only have 7 or 8 minutes left. Am I muted? No, I'm good. Let me make this. All right, so we only have 7 or 8 minutes left for the class. So instead of reporting out from the groups, I want to show you this video, which is really a nice summary of what we've been talking about. That's a good way to end the class. And then I'll see you on Tuesday. These questions you have, there are 9 questions which are due, the answers are due a week from today. I only want you to write on 4 of them. I expect a round of applause at that point. Come on. All right. I want you to pick your, now listen, this is a WID class, this is a writing class. So I want you to pick the 4 that you have passion about, or the 4 you want to write about, right? Don't pick, I mean, look at those questions and go, yeah, I can write about this one. I can write about this one. Pick the 4 that hit you, and particularly the 4 questions where you can give me your thoughts in addition to the quotes and the examples. You know, all the other stuff is fine. Who, where, when, what, but make sure in your answer we start emphasizing the why. And the why is your thinking. You know, the why is what you are thinking. I want to start moving this class into the thinking part of the writing. And the only way to do that is to let you pick the questions where you feel you can express your thoughts. Okay? So out of the 9, pick 4. And they're due next Thursday. Oleg, let's go to the video.
Okay.
Moving forward into some of the other issues of facing New York on Tuesday, and some of the other causes for development. I think you have enough information to answer 4 of the questions. Go with your passion. It's due a week from today. So bye. Enjoy the weekend.
See ya.
Okay, take care.
Thank you, Professor.
Yeah.